This is Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Grace Napolitano. She is a member of the United States Congress. And I know since I've known you and watched you, you have been dedicated like none other to support those that may struggle with mental illness.
Yes, sir.
It's been one of your passions, and I understand you applauded recently the job of the LA County Board of Supervisors recently to dedicate more resources to the mental health of those of our family members that are incarcerated.
Correct, both in prisons and in jails. And also create programs to be able to help children in schools to identify the issues early on before they become big issues.
And let's talk about the attention being paid to mental health. We have learned over the last 10, 20 years how so many folks who are in jail, who are in prison, they are diagnosed, dual diagnosed, tri-diagnosed with a whole litany of mental health conditions. If they just could get the treatment they need, they could be functioning members of society.
That is very true. Helping the families understand how to help them. Unfortunately, some of them do not want to take medications, and they run afoul of the law again.
Right.
And so we need to be able to work with the American Civil Liberties Union to understand that they need to help us help those older individuals.
Sure.
Be able to get services they need. Otherwise, they get themselves into trouble and somebody else into trouble.
So on the federal level, I understand you're chair of the Mental Health Caucus, is that right? Sure. So what is being done? I mean, obviously the issue can be so very local, but what can be done on a national level? What's the conversation? Is it funding? Is it education? Programmatic? What can be done?
It's all of the above. You have several bills that are being proposed at different levels. Mine is for children, mental health in schools. You have adult legislation being proposed by my colleague Tim Murphy, and it deals with a lot of the things you're talking about, the 5150s, et cetera. Right. It's funding. There is no fund available. You have to go for a pay for. That means you have to find the money. So in other words, you rob it from Peter to pay Paul.
But do you feel as if with the recent wave of massacres throughout our nation, through gun violence, through stabbings, be it at schools, be it at movie theaters, be it at naval recruitment centers, in each of those cases, we hear mental health was an issue.
Well,
you try attention.
But you try to blame them, and it's a big, big issue, and then it goes away, and the people forget, and then we're back to normal. This has happened for decades, as you well know.
And I do know that, but I'm wondering if we're at least getting to a place where we recognize there's a common denominator.
There is a beginning of the opening of that, yes.
I want to also talk about another segment of our population near and dear to you, and that is our veterans.
Oh, yes.
Again, you have been a proponent of veterans for decades. We know that so many of our veterans come home with mental health conditions. We think about the tragic losses in the Middle East over the last 10 years, 4,000 or 5,000 have died. When we think about the number of suicides,
22 a day.
Yeah, so all death is tragic, don't get me wrong, but the suicide deaths are bypassing the deaths on the battlefield.
It's unconscionable that we haven't been able to pinpoint it, and it isn't an easy thing to do.
But I do feel, just as a journalist and a student of government, that we are starting to pay more attention to the mental health of our returning veterans. Is that fair? Am I naive, or am I onto something?
They're beginning to. Take, for instance, the Westwood site, which should have been used for veterans decades ago. The fact that they need to have more trained military personnel that have been enjoined in war so they can understand the issues these men and women go through.
But are we seeing that? I mean, I know, like you said, the Westwood site, they're reconfiguring to make sure it's dedicated to Veterans Affairs. But you know, the VA had its issues last year. It appears that the VA's back on track. And that was just mental health. That was all health. So have we turned a corner on the delivery of services to veterans, be it medical health or mental health?
I think it's beginning to open the door. I think that the recognition, a lot of the things that need to be done have yet to be done. And that's what we're hoping is going to help. And the community, the advocates, the families are beginning to feed in as what is a necessity for them to be able to help these veterans assimilate.
I want to talk about the families, and I want to talk about the veterans themselves. I don't recall if I mentioned this to you the last time we spoke, but maybe 3-4 years ago, I had the opportunity, really the honor, to interview a veteran. He was from the Inland Empire, probably 6'5", handsome young man. he was a shell of his former self. I actually can feel myself getting emotional because I think about him. He was so racked with PTSD, he could barely function. But he was on his way to recovery. He was.
Was he getting treatment?
He was getting treatment. But the point is that it took him a while to get that treatment. He couldn't admit, his family couldn't admit. So
they didn't know how to recognize it and how to reach out and get services to that individual. And that's what we're trying to tell the VA is you have to, any individual who is served in Afghanistan or Iraq, I tell them get mental health service whether you think you need them or not. Because in the end, you are going to have to download.
And one could presumably benefit, whether one has a mental illness.
Thank you.
Just talking it through. It could make you more healthy.
But we need to have providers that understand how to address these issues. And not just a mental health provider, but a veteran mental health provider that has served in the war.
Are there more?
They're hiring some, but I don't think that these individuals have served enough in the war that these individuals have served to understand what they've faced.
You represent significant portions of Los Angeles County, and in many portions of your district and beyond, the drought is impacting your constituents, our friends and neighbors like none other. Many communities are working valiantly to cut their water use. Some in your district have done very well, other cities have not. But you know, you're in the district now, you're home.
Yes.
What are you hearing? What are you seeing when it comes to the drought?
Oh gosh, Brad, how much time have you got?
Exactly.
I've been working on this for over a decade and a half. We started proposing increase to Title 16 funding, which is recycled water, the purple pipe.
Got it.
Some 15 years ago. We've tried to increase the funding from 15 million. The budget is about 25. The need is 300 million. And this is already authorized projects to be able to increase the amount of water that can be reused. I
was reading you and some of your colleagues in the Democratic caucus in California proposing the water in the 21st century legislation.
Correct.
And I'm keying in on desalination. I have been going up and down the state interviewing folks. Desal seems to be hot, if I can use that cliche.
That's one of them,
I mean, Santa Barbara's reopening a desal plant.
Finally.
You know what's happening in Carlsbad, California.
With nuclear.
Well, no, not so much San Onofre. They're building a new...
Oh, the one in San Diego.
Exactly. They're building a desal plant. What are you hearing? What are you saying on the question of desal?
Well, desal is one of the highest costs.
It is.
So it is one of the tools, but you also have recycling, you have education of people, you have the ability to store underground in aquifers, because given the heat, you're going to have 25% evaporation pretty soon.
What can be done, though, in Washington? Because, as you know, in California, in the state legislature, your former home, the Democrats and Republicans came together, got the water bond on the ballot, it passed by a large margin. It doesn't seem as if there's a bipartisan consensus on water issues in Washington, D.C.
Unfortunately, this is the administration's take, that they're trying to work more with Central Valley folks than they are with Southern California.
Which is doing fairly well vis-a-vis the Central Valley. You know, we're using the same amount of water now than we did 40 years ago.
But they're not. They use more water. And they want more, and they want us to pay for it, and they get their subsidized, which I found that very hard to take.
What do we do? We're all Californians. We want to support our neighbors.
We've got to be more educated about the issue of water in Southern California, and when the water bonds come down, be sure that Southern California gets its adequate amount and fair share of that fund to be able to desal, to be able to recycle, to be able to educate and store.
Do you feel as if we'll see some federal help? We've seen trickles of it over the year, but do you feel as if more maybe coming down?
Look at Senator Feinstein's bill. I'm not on it yet because I don't know how much of that is going to go to Central Valley. I'm more focused on Southern California because we get left out of the equation.
And you represent Southern California.
You betcha.
Her name is Grace Napolitano. She is a member of the U.S. Congress. My name is Brad Pomerance. It's Charter Local Edition.